Hey guys, tonight we trudge deep into the freezing mud of the past. Imagine the year is 1310 and you're waking up, if you manage to sleep at all, in a drafty wooden cottage half buried in snow. Your breath fogs the air above your straw mattress and the ceiling drips faintly where last night's frost has started to melt from your body heat. Your clothes are still damp from yesterday's slush and you seriously regret letting the dog sleep closer to the fire than you. And here's the thing, you probably won't survive this. But let's pretend you do. Just for tonight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside. The sky is a dull smear of pale grey, like the world's run out of colour. Snow has sealed the earth in silence. Your boots, if you even have them, crunch into the top crust, and immediately the icy wet soaks through. Welcome to a medieval peasant's version of winter, a time not for holiday cheer, but for raw survival. Your home is a wattle and daub, hut sticks mud, and a roof of straw. It looks quaint now in a museum diorama kind of way, but when you live in it, that thatch is home to bugs, birds, and the occasional weasel. Still, it's all that stands between your family and the wind that slices through the village like a knife. The walls, thin, insulation non-existent. Windows, think tiny holes covered with animal bladder or oiled cloth glass, is for churches and kings. At night, cold creeps in like a silent thief. You press your back to the wall, and it feels alive, like it's breathing cold right into your spine. Inside, everything smells of smoke, wet wool, and old onions. The ceiling's low enough that you duck even though no one back then is over 5'6" on a good day. Your bed is a pallet stuffed with straw, maybe shared with siblings, your spouse, or a restless toddler who kicks like a mule in his sleep. Historians still argue whether most medieval peasants truly slept through the night or if they followed a segmented sleep cycle, a first sleep, a wakeful period, and then a second sleep. You're just trying not to shiver your way into the grave. Now the snow, it's not fluffy and clean. It's mixed with ash mud and traces of stuff you don't want to identify. And because the thatch above isn't perfect melting snow, leaks through in slow drips, forming icy puddles on the packed earth floor. You've learned to angle your bed just so to avoid the worst of it. And that thatch, let's talk about it. It's made from water reeds or straw bundled tight, angled steeply to let snow slide off, but not fast enough. Too much snow and it sags ominously. Sometimes it caves in entirely. But replacing thatch midwinter, huh? You might as well build a new house, which people did. Often. You go out to check the roofline slipping once and landing squarely on a frozen rut of pig droppings. Welcome to the medieval home inspection pass. Fail by broken tailbone. It's still early. The sun hasn't properly risen, it just glows dimly behind the clouds like a sad lantern. You light a tallow candle indoors, its flame sputtering and releasing the faint aroma of sheep fat. Yum. Your children are awake. They fight over the corner spot near the hearth where it's maybe 5 degrees warmer. You give them each a sip of thin ale because water isn't safe and it's too cold to fetch more snow for melting just yet. By now your hands are numb. You're wrapping them in old wool scraps held on with twine, but it barely helps. You hold them out to the fire little more than a glowing pile of coals and hope you don't singe your sleeves again like last week. There's still a faint burn mark from that. You joke about it but secretly worry your only tunic might go up in smoke one night while you sleep. Through the cracks in the door you hear your neighbours. A pig squeals. Someone's chopping wood, each thud echoing like a funeral drum. There's coughing too, the wet, chesty kind. Probably old Roger next door. He's had that cough since summer and still hasn't died. Impressive, honestly. Here's the fun part, the cold isn't even the worst of it. The boredom is. no fields to till, no animals to herd, unless you count convincing the chickens not to roost on the hearth. You're stuck indoors with your family, your lice, and the smell of last week's cabbage soup soaking into every surface. And there are no doors on the bedrooms because, spoiler, there are no bedrooms. Just one open room where privacy is a memory and snoring is communal. Someone's always talking in their sleep or grinding their teeth or kicking. You pretend you don't hear it because what's the alternative? Move outside, nice try. Still, somehow there's beauty here. You peek out at the trees, dusted white like sugared cake. You watch smoke rise from other rooftops curling against the slate sky. And for a brief second, wrapped in a woolen blanket that smells like wet dog and old milk, you feel safe. Just don't breathe too deep. That's not pine smoke. You wake again in the night, not because of a noise, but because your backside is cold. The fire's low and the stone floor is leaking chill up through your straw bedding like a ghost trying to cuddle. You grope around in the dark for your cloak, thick, scratchy and vaguely damp, but at least it's not frozen stiff this time. You aren't alone. Beside you, curled up in a pile, are your siblings, your spouse, the baby, and something with hooves. Yep, it's the goat again. Maybe a sheep. Could be a small pig too, depending on what kind of winter it is. Either way, you're all sharing one room, and one basic principle: body heat equals survival. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly welcomed animals indoors for warmth, or if it was just desperation. But tonight that goat is the warmest thing in the house, and you're spooning it like it's your lover. You've named it Bread. Not sure why. Possibly ironic. The cow lives in a lean-to attached to the cottage. You can hear her lowing gently through the shared wall. And let's not even talk about the chickens. They perch on rafters, cluck in their sleep, and occasionally poop directly onto your best wooden spoon. That's just life. You don't have a barn, really. That would be luxurious. Instead, the home and the animals' quarters are mashed together into what you generously call a longhouse. It's a building technique common in Northern Europe during colder centuries: stone or timber walls for the humans, a section for livestock on the end, and one communal roof of thatch sagging beneath the weight of snow and bird nests. You rise carefully so as not to disturb your makeshift roommates. One of the children has wriggled sideways and kicked off the blanket. You tuck them back in with a sigh that turns to mist in the frigid air. In moments like this, your fingers tingle so badly it feels like bees are hibernating under your skin. You shuffle to the hearth. A few coals glow faintly, like dying stars at the bottom of a black sky. You grab the iron poker, give the ash a hopeful jab, and toss on a few twigs you've hidden under a pot to keep them dry. With luck and a prayer to St. Bridget, patron of warmth homes and confused peasants, the fire coughs back to life. In the flickering light, the goat's eyes shine like little haunted marbles. It blinks slowly. You blink back. There's a moment of mutual understanding. Neither of you signed up for this, but here you are. The walls creak. Wind claws at the shutters, slipping in through every crack. You sit huddled in your cloak, trying not to think about what you'll do when the woodpile runs out. Because it will. It always does. You dream of forests of endless logs split by someone else, of hands without blisters. And then the goat sneezes directly into your face, dragging you back to reality. You'd think with all these animals indoors it'd be warmer. It is technically, but not by much. Warm enough that your spit doesn't freeze, but cold enough that your joints feel older than your grandmother's teeth, which she keeps in a rag under the bed, by the way. Family heirloom. And yet there's a rhythm here. You know when the cow shifts it's nearly dawn. You know the rooster will scream about 15 seconds after you finally fall back asleep. And you know someone's going to step in something warm and unpleasant on the way to the door. Every single morning. You try to rest your eyes again. The fire is steady now, casting shadows that flicker across the rough beams. You imagine what it would be like to have separate rooms. Maybe even a bed with feathers. Historians suggest the average peasant didn't even own a real mattress, just sacks of straw or dried leaves, which you changed about as often as you changed your shirt. Spoiler, rarely. Outside, the wind howls like a choir of angry wolves, which, to be fair, might be wolves. They've been bold lately, pushing closer to the village following the scent of livestock. The last thing you want is to go out for the privy and come back one limb lighter. So you don't. You make peace with the indoor chamber pot instead, which sits smugly in the corner like a ceramic confession box. Here's a quirky little tidbit for you. Some wealthier homes had special stools with holes in them for doing your business inside basically medieval toilets. You've got a bucket and a strong stomach. And you're grateful for it. Most people had to wade through snow for their midnight business, which is exactly as fun as it sounds. Eventually, the baby cries. You reach for them instinctively, wrapping both of you in the blanket, careful to avoid the goat. The baby's skin is like ice, and you tuck them under your chin, humming something old and tuneless. Maybe it's a lullaby. Maybe it's just your teeth chattering in rhythm. Outside, the first hints of dawn begin to lighten the edges of the sky. You'll need to fetch water soon, break the ice on the barrel, try not to spill any, try not to cry when it splashes your wrist. Breakfast will be thin ale, maybe a hunk of coarse bread if you're lucky. And then the day begins again. But for now, for these quiet moments wrapped in wool and barn smell and half sleep, you rest your head against the crooked beam and exhale. Just a few more weeks of this, maybe less, maybe more. Time is slippery when everything looks like snow. You wake to the sharp reality that your blanket smells like mildew and your fingers refuse to uncurl. Somewhere in the night, a draft crept across your toes like a ghost on patrol. Your joints crack like old floorboards as you sit up. There's a distinct crunch from under your straw mattress, probably ice. Hopefully not a mouse. There's no such thing as central heating. Instead, there's a hierarchy of layers. First, you wrap yourself in a linen shift that's seen better decades. Over that, a scratchy wool tunic. Then a cloak if you have one. Socks, maybe if you're rich. You wrap your feet in rags and pray the dog doesn't chew through them again. Bedding is even more glamorous. Imagine trying to sleep with a collection of slightly damp, musty-smelling fabrics stitched together over the years. The mattress is a sack filled with straw or maybe reeds, which tend to break down into crumbly, pokey shards after a few weeks. You swear something bit you last night, and you're not sure whether it was a flea, a spider, or your little brother. You shift the top layer, and a wave of dust floats into the air, glittering briefly in the morning light. That's not ambiance, it's your lungs slowly staging a rebellion. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants regularly changed out or refreshed their bedding, or whether they just lived with the itchiness until spring arrived, until the bugs outnumbered the humans. The straw's not just for comfort, by the way, it serves as insulation too. Underneath the mattress you've layered rotting hay reeds, even moss, whatever you could gather before the frost came. It gives off a smell somewhere between wet earth and regret. But it keeps your backside slightly less frozen than the floor, so you endure it. Now about those covers. There's no plush duvet here, just a pile of textiles stitched, woven, or downright scavenged. Maybe a wool blanket passed down from your grandmother. Maybe an old cloak patched 5 times and still fraying at the edges. The heaviest item might be an old sheepskin if you haven't eaten it yet. Its heavy smells like barnyard and has a tendency to slide off in the middle of the night. Still, it's better than sleeping without one. The cold seeps through any opening, so you wrap your blanket like a human burrito and hope nobody needs you until sunrise. Your back aches. Your neck aches. Everything aches. You stretch, yawn, and hear what can only be described as a crackling. Is it your joints, the bedding, or something living in the corner? You're not sure, and frankly, you don't want to know before breakfast. Breakfast. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, the morning ritual, shaking out the bedding. It's part necessity, part pest control. You give it a good flap out the window. A few suspicious crumbs fly out. Also a beetle. Possibly two. Your sister shrieks. You pretend not to notice. And this, dear listener, is why bedtime wasn't cozy and serene. It was a war zone. You weren't drifting off with lavender mist and lo-fi music. You were battling cold critters and the ever-present threat of rolling into the damp wall and waking up with mushrooms growing in your hair. Probably. One quirky detail some peasants actually used: warmed stones to stay cozy at night. You'd heat a rock in the hearth, wrap it in cloth and tuck it into bed. It loses heat quickly, but for that first 5 minutes, absolute bliss. Just don't forget it's a rock when you roll onto it at 3 a.m. Tonight, though, you didn't have time to heat one. You were too busy chasing the pig back into its pen after it chewed through the door flap again. Yes, pigs are warm, but they snore like drunk uncles and have no concept of personal space. You lay back down for a moment, pulling the covers over your face. There's a faint hope that maybe the sun isn't quite up yet. Maybe you can steal another 10 minutes before the fire needs tending, but the toddler's already up babbling about monsters in the corner. You sigh. You are the monster in the corner, kid. Through the thin wall you hear the neighbors again. Someone's arguing over who gets to wear the dry socks today. It's loud but familiar, oddly comforting. The whole village exists in this bubble of frost smoke and survival. It's a shared misery, a communal exhaustion. You glance at the ceiling. There's a cobweb in the corner shaped suspiciously like St. Cuthbert's cross. You consider it a blessing. Superstition is cheaper than insulation. Your feet touch the floor and it's like stepping on a slab of frozen pork. You hop around trying to wake up your blood-whispering curses under your breath that technically count as prayers. The dog stirs in the corner and gives you a look that says, "I warned you about sharing the blanket." No matter. You've survived another night. That's a victory. You take a deep breath, pull your rags tighter, and shuffle toward the hearth again. The cold is brutal. The bedding is suspicious. But you're alive. And in winter, that's what counts. The embers are low again. You crouch near the hearth and blow gently on the glowing coals, trying not to inhale soot or singe your eyebrows again. Your breath comes out in pale puffs, ghosting over the ash. With fingers that barely bend from the cold, you nudge some bark shavings into place and pray they catch. A fire never truly goes out if you're careful. You bank it at night, pile ash over the coals to keep them insulated, and if you're lucky, you can coax it back to life in the morning. If not, you have two choices. Start from scratch or trudge to your neighbor's house with a burning stick in hand, begging for a light like some desperate medieval Prometheus. It's more than heat. The hearth is life. It's warmth, yes, but it's also light protection, a cooking space, and the medieval equivalent of a family television. Everyone gathers around it, even when there's nothing to say. Just watching the flames flicker is the closest thing to entertainment you've got between November and March. Historians still argue whether most peasants used wood or peat, more often since supply depended so heavily on location. Where there were forests, wood was chopped and stored assuming you had permission. Forests were often protected, owned by lords or the church, and getting caught poaching timber could earn you a fine or worse. You've got a pile of damp twigs and one suspiciously damp log. The whole thing smells faintly like pond. But after a few tense minutes, it finally catches. Flames curl upward, licking the pot of last night's soup which you wisely left hanging just above the coals. It's mostly turnip water with a hint of wild onion, but this morning it smells like a 5-star feast. The baby coughs. One of the kids mumbles in their sleep. You hear the goat sneeze, again suspiciously close to your sleeping spot. But for now, the fire is alive. You feed it carefully. Too much wood at once and it chokes. Too little and it sulks back into smoke. You've learned to nurture it, coax it like a pet or a very cranky uncle who needs constant snacks. Some nights you wake up just to check on it. Not because you're worried it'll die out, though you are, but because of the dread that if you let it go too long, the house will start to frost from the inside out. You've seen it before, tiny icicles on the rafters, your breath hanging in the air like a shroud. Once your older brother touched the wall in mid-January and his hand stuck there for a second too long. He hasn't trusted plaster since. Now let's talk fire hazards. Your walls are wooden, your roof is straw, your bedding is dry hay. You do the math. One quirky detail. Some families used fire dogs, no, not actual canines, but metal supports to hold up logs in the hearth, improving air circulation and burn efficiency. You've got 2 bricks and a very hopeful attitude. Still, it works, most of the time, as the room warms slightly, like going from bone-chilling to just mildly soul-crushing. Your family begins to stir. One by one, they crawl from their nests of bedding hair, tangled noses red, and voices scratchy. You all look like you just came out of hibernation, or a particularly questionable haystack. The older kids know the drill. They start feeding the fire while you prep for the next task, collecting more wood. Your stack is pitiful. The logs are dwindling, and everything left outside is damp. You sigh. You'll need to head out soon, hatchet in hand, boots tied with hope and frozen string. The morning is dim, but the promise of firelight keeps everyone moving. Someone starts poking around the ashes from last night's bread-baking attempt, hoping for unburnt crumbs. The smell of warming soup lifts spirits ever so slightly. By now, the house is a little less frigid. The goat seems content. The kids are squabbling over who gets to sit closest to the hearthstone, and someone's already singing a tune with no words, just la 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 in increasingly dramatic tones. That's how people made it through these winters. Not with comfort, but with ritual. Fire stoking, food stirring, song singing, wood chopping rhythm, life reduced to its most essential beats. And oh, how essential that fire is. It's a medieval miracle. Every single day it stays lit. You've come to admire its stubbornness, how it flickers and spits and clings to life like you do. You whisper to it sometimes when the others aren't listening. Silly things. Thanks for staying. Please don't go out tonight. I need you. Because the fire is the line between hardship and danger, between bitter discomfort and actual death. It's not just a source of heat. It's a fragile, flickering defiance against the frostbite waiting patiently outside your door. And so, even as the day calls you away to the forest, to the well, to the chores, and the endless march of survival, you glance back at the hearth one more time. You adjust the logs, you tap the coals, and you make sure, above all else, that it'll be burning when you return. Because winter is long and dark and unforgiving, but for now, at least, in this moment, the fire holds. Outside, the world is a sheet of ice and mud, the kind that sticks to your boots until you're carrying an extra 3 pounds per foot. You step carefully, clutching a bucket in one hand and a half-frozen hope in the other. The water barrel's near the door, and by now it's more ice than water. You crack the surface with a stick like you're mining for disappointment. But you're not outside just for water. No, nature's calling, and not the gentle kind. You grimace, shuffle past the house corner, and there it is, the family privy. A crooked shack leaning at an angle that implies it gave up trying a long time ago. The door creaks open, loudly enough to wake nearby squirrels, and inside you find the usual, a rough wooden bench, a gaping hole, and frost creeping up the walls like it's auditioning to be the main character in your morning horror show. Historians still argue whether peasants had actual outhouses or just used designated spots behind hedges. In winter, either option involves exposure to the elements and an awkward balancing act that tests your core strength. You sit down and instantly regret it. Cold. So very cold. You rise faster than you sat. Alternative chamber pot. Inside, near the fire, sitting smugly with its questionable contents. You hated it as a child, but these days you're grateful. Less walking, less hypothermia risk. Just don't spill it on the rushes again. Those take forever to stop smelling. One quirky little fact, Some chamber pots were decorated with crude jokes or little faces inside, like a medieval version of bathroom graffiti. Yours is plain and chipped and probably older than you, but it serves its purpose. You carry the pot out carefully, both hands steady like you're holding the Holy Grail. Because if you drop it, it's game over. Frozen waste on your shoes. The dog's curious nose. The shame. Back inside, the fire crackles, and everyone pretends not to smell what you just did. It's part of the unspoken peasant code. We all do it, we all ignore it. You set the pot down gently near the door, give it a polite nod, and move on with your life. Now, for your feet. Still wet from yesterday's walk to the woods, your cloth wrappings are stiff and lined with a fresh crust of frost. You peel them off slowly, revealing red, raw skin beneath. The tingling sensation that follows is the kind of pain that makes you see imaginary saints. You wiggle your toes. 2 of them are numb. One is turning a shade of blue you don't trust. You rub them with a handful of rough wool, hoping friction is enough to revive them. It usually is. Usually. Your grandmother mutters something in the corner, old advice about keeping a potato in your pocket to ward off frostbite. You tried that once. It just got moldy and made your coat smell like soup. But she's not wrong about the cold. It creeps into bones, hides in your joints. When you're young, it makes you whine. When you're old, it makes you silent. And when you're too old, it takes you in your sleep so gently you don't even wake. You sit near the fire and stretch out your feet, warming them carefully, slowly. Too fast, and the pain returns like a slap from a cold, wet fish. You've learned the rhythm. Now warm, rotate, breathe. Sip your ale. Nod at the goat. Life continues. Speaking of elites, not just for celebration, it's your hydration. Water in the winter is often unsafe, especially if you're melting snow from questionable patches of ground. Low-alcohol ale is safer, and even the children drink it, not for fun, but because no one wants dysentery in a snowstorm. Today you've got a bit left in the jug. It's flat, warm, and vaguely sour. Still better than what's in the chamber pot. One of the children gets up to use it. They make a face. You make a face back. It becomes a game of who can hold their breath longer. You win. Barely. And just when the day starts to settle into something resembling routine, the wind picks up. A sharp gust slams the shutters, sending a cloud of soot down from the chimney. Your eyes water. The dog barks at the window like it's seen a ghost. You sigh. Just another reminder that winter doesn't rest. It waits, watches, and every now and then shoves a gust of wind down your chimney just to say, still here. You scrape out the ashes from the firebox, spreading them thin outside to keep the mud down. Ash makes good anti-slip grit. You nearly fall anyway. The pig laughs. You imagine it, at least. Sometimes in the midst of these tasks you daydream. Of warmth, of spring, of a bed where your feet don't hang off the edge and nothing bites your toes in the night. But then someone calls your name, asking if there's any more soup, and the dream fades. Still, you've made it through another night. And that means everything. Because in this world where even a trip to the bathroom can be an act of bravery, survival is the small, quiet kind of heroic. The smell hits you first, warm, slightly sour, unmistakably rooty. Breakfast is ready. You sit down with your family around the hearth and the wooden bowls come out. They're not matching. They're not even particularly clean. But they hold food, and that's what matters. This morning's delight, barley gruel, again. You dip your spoon and it oozes thick and grey like someone boiled porridge and forgot to stop. It tastes like warmth, barely. If you're lucky, there's a sprinkle of dried herbs for flavour. If you're really lucky, there's a tiny scrap of smoked bacon floating on top like a ship lost at sea. You chew slowly, mostly because there's nothing else to do. You don't taste your food, not really. You survive it. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were underfed or just severely undernourished. You're getting calories, sure, but vitamins. That's a concept for future centuries. Your winter diet is beige, dull, functional. It starts with gruel, moves into bread if you've saved enough rye or barley, maybe a piece of dried turnip, dried peas if they haven't molded in the storehouse. Everything is tough, fibrous, and suspiciously chewy. You chew not because you're hungry, but because the food demands effort. Meat rare, unless you've slaughtered one of your own animals, which is a huge sacrifice. That goat you were spooning last night, it's worth more alive than dead. Chickens are egg machines. Cows give milk. Pigs might get the chop near midwinter, but only if they're too big to feed through to spring. So you make do with what you've preserved: dried vegetables, sour ale, a suspicious jar of something pickled that no one really remembers making, but everyone agrees is probably food. One quirky tidbit: some families added sawdust or ground tree bark to their bread flour to make it last longer. It's not tasty, but it adds bulk. You've tried it. The texture is memorable, like chewing damp wood chips. You think fondly of fruit. Apples maybe back in September. You had a few tucked away in straw for winter, but they're long gone now. Either eaten rotted or turned into a sad little cider that made your uncle swear he saw St. Michael in the hearth flames. The worst part of winter food isn't the lack of flavor, it's the lack of variety. Your body craves something fresh. Your tongue dreams of berries, of honey, of meat cooked on a spit until the fat drips and sizzles. Instead, you get turnip stew again. There's a moment during the meal when you glance over and realize your younger brother is just licking the spoon. No food, just the memory of it. He looks satisfied. You envy him. After the meal, it's time to check the food stores. You open the little wooden chest by the wall. Inside, root vegetables shriveled and sulking, a few onions, their skins like paper, some dried beans in a cloth sack that has a suspicious hole in it, likely mice. You grimace. You'll eat them anyway. You'll just cook the mouse out. The bread is wrapped in cloth and hung from a rafter to keep it away from rats. It's hard enough to use as a weapon, but still edible if you soak it in broth. Everything in winter must be softened by boiling, by mashing, or by sheer force of will. You scrape the last bit of gruel from the pot and lick the spoon. It's not gluttony. It's efficiency. Every calorie matters when your days involve hauling wood, breaking ice, and shivering with dignity. Someone once told you of a noble who had access to oranges in winter. Oranges. Bright, sweet, juicy things you can't even imagine. You wonder what they smell like. Probably magic. Even the animals are bored of winter food. The chickens peck listlessly at their feed. The pig grunts in protest when handed another cold rutabaga. The goat eats everything as usual, including your sister's mitten. She yells. No one is surprised. There's a kind of ritual in all this. Boil the pot, share the food, scrape the bowl, sigh, repeat. You glance outside. Snow covers everything like a silence you can't speak through. There are no markets open, no trade wagons until the roads thaw. You are utterly dependent on what you stored or what your neighbours will trade, if they're in a generous mood, which in February is rare. Once in a fit of desperate creativity, someone in the village tried to make a dessert. Boiled dried apples in ale with a sprinkle of crushed nuts. It was ambitious. The entire village still talks about it, fondly, as a tale of bravery. You sip from your kupale again, flat, warm, and slightly sour. At this point, it's as comforting as a bedtime story. You've stopped missing sweetness. Now you just miss texture. And here's the truly humbling part. This is a good year. There's food, not much but enough. You remember the bad winter when a neighbor ate nothing but boiled bark and shoe leather. He survived. Sort of. He still twitches when he sees boots. You tuck away the pot, cover the bread, and tie up the food chest. One more meal, one more step towards spring. You say a quiet prayer to St. Nicholas, not for gifts, but for fresh eggs and a loaf with actual flavor. Winter food doesn't nourish the soul. It just keeps the body from falling over. But that's enough. For now, Your feet are barely thawed from the last outing, your joints ache from sleeping half-curled under the weight of frost and goats, and your stomach is trying to convince your brain that gruel is not in fact a meal. But outside someone's calling. It's muffled by the wind, but you know what it means. Work. Again. Your body groans in protest. You're not sick enough to stay in bed. No one is. Not unless you're half dead. And even then, someone might still hand you a shovel. You throw your cloak around your shoulders, press a rag to your mouth to keep the chill from your lungs, and shuffle toward the door. The latch is frozen again. You give it a firm whack. The wood creaks open, and the wind greets you with a slap. Today, you're helping repair the village path. It's not glamorous work. It's not even smart. It's just necessary. The snow has compacted into a slippery death slick, and every other person who's fallen has blamed the last person who didn't fix it. You walk with care, your shoes wrapped in strips of old leather for traction. The soles are so thin now that you can feel the frost through them, like the ground itself wants to eat your toes. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly worked through the coldest months or spent most of winter huddled indoors. Truth is, it depends. If you had food, you could afford to stay home more. If not, you braved the frost, even if it meant coughing blood by supper. You reach the path and start shoveling snow aside with a splintered board someone generously called a spade. Your hands go numb by the fifth scoop. You keep going. There's no choice. Beside you, your cousin is digging with a stick that's seen better centuries. He grunts. You grunt. It's the closest thing to a conversation you'll have all morning. By midday, though no one actually has a clock, you're sweating under your cloak, your hair clinging to your forehead in wet ropes and your arms trembling from the effort. You stop to sip some ale, then immediately regret it as the cold liquid sears your throat like ice fire. One quirky detail about peasant work in winter: some folks wore straw stuffed into their clothes for extra insulation. Not fancy linen, not wool. Just dry grass tucked everywhere it could possibly go. It works. It also itches like judgment. You glance around and notice a woman nearby doing laundry. Yes, laundry. In winter. She's hammering frozen tunics against a rock near a stream that steams slightly from its own motion. Her hands are red and raw, and every cloth comes out stiff as bark. You nod at her. She nods back. You're both warriors in different battles. You get back to digging. The snow is packed hard now, layered with dirt and frozen pig droppings. It smells worse than usual. A few chickens watch you from a fence post, judging silently. In the distance, someone calls out one of the oxen has slipped on the icy path, and now it's lying sideways in the snow legs, splayed like a spilled table. You and the others drop your tools and rush over, because if that ox breaks a leg, that's the village's ploughing season gone with it. You circle the beast-talk gently, coax it to stand. It breathes heavy clouds, eyes rolling with panic. The ground is too slick, so someone throws down armfuls of hay. You add some wood ash from your morning fire. Eventually, after much groaning and coordinated heaving, the animal rises. Everyone cheers, quietly of course. Wouldn't want to spook the other ox. Your back is now officially broken, or feels like it, but you head back to the path, resume your work. The cold has crept back into your sleeves, settling into your bones like it's signed a lease. Work pauses only once more for the briefest of lunches. You unwrap a hunk of bread from your coat, gnaw on it like it owes you money. Someone shares a bite of salted fish. It's small, sharp and wonderful. You forget your pain for a moment. Then it's back to digging. You wonder sometimes what it must be like to not have to work in this. To be one of the lucky few. The miller, perhaps. Or the priest. Someone with gloves. Someone with soup that doesn't double as roofing material. But then your cousin slaps you on the back and points out the patch you missed, and the thought is gone. The sun begins to dip, just a little glow behind the grey clouds. Not that you see it, but you feel it in your fingers. The shadows stretch, your breath thickens. The chickens return to their coop. Even the snow seems to settle. You gather your things. Which is to say, You pick up your board, shake off the mud, and hope it doesn't snap tomorrow. Your body is a collection of aches strung together with stubbornness. You head home. Inside, the fire still smoulders. The kids are wrestling, the goat's on the table again. You sigh, toss your cloak into the corner, and sit with a grunt that echoes off the rafters. Sick. Too bad. Work still needs doing. And you're the one doing it, because no one else will. Your toes still tingle from today's frost as you slump down beside the hearth. Someone's boiling water in a blackened pot, and the steam feels like a kiss from heaven. You stretch your fingers toward the warmth and stare blankly at the fire, letting the haze of half-exhaustion wash over you. Then you feel it, that sharp little sting just above your ankle. You scratch, again and again. Lice, or maybe fleas. Could be both, probably both. You scratch harder and mutter something unholy. Your sister glances over and shrugs. She's got them too. Everyone does. You once tried bathing them out, but a bucket of ice water in January doesn't exactly scream spa day. So now, you just scratch, scratch, scratch. Someone reaches into a pouch by the wall and pulls out a salve. It's a paste made from lard goose droppings and powdered herbs. You raise an eyebrow. They nod solemnly. It works. You let them dab it on your legs. It smells like a burning herb garden inside a chicken coop, but you want relief, not a fragrance award. Welcome to medieval medicine. Historians still argue whether medieval folk truly believed in the healing power of charms or if they just hedged their bets. Either way, tonight you're going full ritual. You pull out the family's winter remedy book. Well, not a book more, a piece of stitched parchment with ink that ran years ago. Grandma reads aloud. For winter chills, rub goose fat on feet, bind with wool, say 3 Hail Marys and 2 curses at the moon. You consider it. Seems reasonable, she adds. If that doesn't work, bleed the arm. You flinch. No thanks. Last time you tried bloodletting, your uncle fainted before the knife even came out. Still hasn't lived it down. You look at your raw feet again. Maybe the goose fat is worth a try. Someone fetches the jar. It's been sitting by the hearth all winter. It's room temperature, which means only slightly less cold than your soul. You slather it on. It's slippery, sticky, and oddly comforting. You pull a scrap of wool over it and wiggle your toes experimentally. Better, marginally. Of course, no healing ritual is complete without invoking a saint. Tonight, you whisper to Saint Roche, patron of plagues and sick animals, just to cover your bases. You're not sure if he handles frostbite, but you figure he knows someone who does. Across the room, someone's coughing again. Not a little sniffle, a deep, wet, chesty kind of cough that says, "Hey, I'm about to ruin your winter." You eye the source. Aunt Maud. She waves a hand and croaks, "It's just the cold. It's always just the cold. Until it's not." You bring her some of the mulled ale you made earlier, flavoured with cloves, honey, and wishful thinking. She takes a sip and smiles. For a moment, she looks peaceful. Then she sneezes so hard, her bonnet shifts sideways. And that's how it is. No doctors, just Herb's hope and whatever passed for wisdom in your village. One quirky fact. Some people believed in burying a sick person's fingernail trimmings under a full moon to draw out illness. Your cousin tried it last winter. Nothing happened, except now she thinks the moon is judging her. You once met a travelling wise woman. She wore 12 rings and carried a bundle of dried frogs in a pouch. She offered to cure your cousin's winter cough by waving a dead sparrow over his head and spitting into the fire. It didn't work, but it was the most exciting thing to happen that week. Your own family leans more traditional: hot drinks, warm wool, and enough garlic to scare off the devil wolves and half your neighbours. Still, sometimes people don't get better. And there's nothing you can do. Just keep the fire burning, keep them warm, keep them company. Death isn't dramatic in winter. It's slow, quiet. It slips in with the frost and lingers like smoke. But tonight Aunt Maud finishes her ale, wraps herself tighter in her shawl, and begins humming an old lullaby you haven't heard since childhood. You feel a twinge in your chest that isn't cold for once, just something else, a kind of warmth. You scratch your ankle again. The salve is working. Maybe. You lie back, staring at the ceiling beams, watching the shadows dance. You wonder what it must be like to visit a doctor, someone with tools and knowledge and the ability to say you'll be fine without crossing their fingers. You imagine it must feel like magic. Instead, you have chicken blood on your boots, salves in your armpits, and half a prayer on your lips, but you're still breathing. That's something. You close your eyes. You itch, you ache, but you're alive. The sun's struggling through the clouds when you shuffle outside, arms wrapped tight around yourself like a human bread roll. You're not heading to the fields today. Your job is closer, sneakier, gathering kindling near the manor. You don't have permission exactly, but you've learned where to walk without being noticed. You round the corner, staying low behind the hedge. Up on the hill, the manor house rises like some smug stone creature, solid, warm-looking, completely out of place in your muddy little world. It has glass in the windows. Real glass. You've only seen it twice. You're still not sure it wasn't a trick of the light. The Lord's chimney is puffing smoke like it's competing with the clouds. You imagine what it must be like inside wide rooms, actual walls, fireplaces in every chamber, feather beds, candles that don't smell like goat. You pause beside a tree and start picking up small branches, twigs, anything dry. You listen. No footsteps, no dogs. Good. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were truly generous to their peasants during harsh winters, or whether they mostly turned a blind eye. Your lord, he handed out 4 salted fish last December and called it a miracle. Generous if you squint. Still, it's not about gifts. It's about contrast. Because while your family huddles around a dying fire, scraping soup from the bottom of the pot, he's sipping mulled wine beside a roaring hearth the size of your entire home. You catch a whiff of something meat. Roasting. Fat dripping into a pan. Your stomach clenches. You haven't smelled meat in days, maybe weeks. You glance up at the manor window. It's glowing gold. You squint harder and catch a glimpse of a tapestry. Red and blue, probably lions or something equally unnecessary. One quirky fact, some lords kept warmed stones in their beds, swapped out by servants every few hours. That's right, they had rotating rocks. You've been spooning a goat for heat. Life's funny like that. You slip another bundle of twigs into your cloak. Carefully. One crack too loud and the game's up. You remember last winter when you were caught pulling up windfallen branches near the manor orchard. The steward made you stand in the snow for an hour as punishment. Your fingers didn't work right for a week. Back home people talk about what it must be like to live in the manor, to sleep without drafts to eat, without chewing the same root 3 times to soften it. You once heard that the Lord's daughter has a book, a real one, with pages and ink and everything. You're not sure what's more magical, the book or the idea of sitting still long enough to read one. Still, lords have their own troubles. You know this. Politics, land squabbles, wars. They're just farther removed. When your family's cold, you pile on another blanket, assuming you have one. When they're cold, they summon someone to stoke the fire or start yelling, sometimes both. You head back down the slope with your bundle, careful not to leave a trail. The kindling will go fast. Everything does. Firewood in winter is like coin, you never have enough, and you're constantly borrowing from tomorrow. At the edge of the village, you pass the priest's house. It's modest but better built than yours. Smoke curls from his chimney too. You wonder if he has dried fruit tucked away, or maybe honey. He offered to bless your home last year. You said yes, not because you believe in miracles, but because it felt like the polite thing to do. Back home, the fire's low again. You add the new kindling, careful not to drop any. One piece slips and rolls toward the goat. It eyes you with suspicion, like it knows you've been somewhere warmer. You sit by the fire and think about the manor again, not with envy, well, maybe a little, but more like curiosity. You wonder if they ever wake in the middle of the night with numb fingers, if they worry about soup running out, if they scratch at bites and whisper prayers in the dark. Maybe. Probably not. Your mother once said, "They live in stone. We live in mud. But stone can crack." You didn't understand it then. You still don't really. But it sounds wise. You hear laughter from outside. The Lord's Son riding past on a pony too clean for this season. You hide your hands in your sleeves. Yours are cracked, split, bleeding at the knuckles. You hope he doesn't look down. He doesn't. He rides past like you're just part of the landscape, and maybe in a way you are. But you've got kindling. You've got soup. You've got a fire that hasn't died yet. And tonight, when the wind howls and frost creeps across the windows, you'll be inside wrapped in rags, spooning bread, the goat watching shadows dance on the wall. And that for now is enough. The night comes early and fast. By the time you finish patching the hole in the wall with bundled straw and mud, the sky is already slipping from grey to indigo. The wind has calmed, but that's no comfort. Stillness usually means colder air is settling in for the evening. But tonight is different. Tonight is St. Lucy's Day. Your bones still ache, your hands are raw, and your dinner was just a ladle of thin stew and a bite of crust so hard you could sand wood with it, but even so there's excitement in the air. Sort of. The children start whispering about candles and sweets. You snort softly. There will be candles, yes. As for sweets, unless someone's planning to sugar a turnip, they can dream on. Your village doesn't have much, but what it does have in winter is ritual. Feast days. Little flickers of celebration to break up the cold grind of endless grey mornings. St. Lucy's is one of them. Patroness of light, warmth and clarity, exactly what you're all lacking. Historians still argue whether the celebration of Lucy came to your region via Scandinavian influence or was more homegrown. But in your village, the tradition is simple: bonfire bread, singing and trying not to freeze while pretending it's fun. You gather your shawl and join the procession of neighbours heading toward the commons. A few brave souls have carried torches, their flames licking at the breeze. The snow glows orange and gold beneath them, and everyone's breath curls upward like ghosts rising to watch the show. Someone, probably that ambitious baker's apprentice, has shaped a few loaves into braided rings and baked them hard as stones. They're handed out with pride. You take one and try not to break a tooth. Festive. The fire's already been lit. It's modest, flickering, hissing where snow has melted into its edges. But it's there, and it's enough. People gather around it, stamping their feet, laughing softly, murmuring old songs that start strong and then trail off as the lyrics vanish into memory. Someone plays a pipe. Badly. Children run in circles around the flame, pretending to be spirits or saints or wolves, depending on how recently they ate. You remember being one of them once, dashing through the snow in your father's cloak, singing nonsense and pretending it was a chant. Now you stand with the adults, quiet, weary, watchful. You sway gently to the music, not because you want to dance, but because your knees are too stiff to stand still. Someone nudges you and offers a sip from a flask. It's spiced wine week, but warm. It burns in a good way, lighting your chest like a second little fire. You nod in thanks, and your nose drips in gratitude. One quirky tradition. Some villagers carry little lanterns with carved wooden symbols, suns, stars, even eyes, to represent Lucy's name. The children wave them proudly. One girl drops hers and nearly sets her cloak alight. Her mother screams. The fire is stomped out. Everyone laughs nervously. It's all a little chaotic, a little cold. But somehow there's joy here. You remember your cousin telling you that in some far-off place people put crowns of candles on their heads for this night. You can't imagine that. You barely trust a candle on a table, let alone on top of your own scalp. Still, it sounds magical and slightly flammable. The priest mumbles a blessing, half lost in the crackle of the fire and the shushing of snow underfoot. You catch bits about light, about hope, about surviving darkness. You nod along because surviving is something you do understand. As the night deepens, the children tire. One by one they are gathered up and wrapped in cloaks, piggybacked home by older siblings or parents. You linger, face turned toward the heat, hands outstretched. Your fingers move in and out of the light like moths uncertain of their own wings. Someone passes a loaf of shared bread and you take a piece. It's dry, it's small, it's vaguely sweet. You savor it slowly, letting your eyes drift over the fire, the faces, the snow. You catch sight of old Marta sitting on a stump, staring into the flames, like she sees something there. Maybe she does. She's seen 40 winters. That's basically immortal in your world. You wonder if next year's St. Lucy's Day will look the same, if the same people will be here, if the fire will burn a little bigger, or not at all. Eventually the cold wins. People drift back home in quiet clusters, the fire left to smoulder its glow, shrinking behind you as you walk. Back in your cottage, the hearth is still warm. The children are half asleep, faces soot-smudged and rosy from windburn. You help pull their blankets tighter. One murmurs something about Lucy's light. You kiss her forehead and tuck her in. You shed your cloak and settle beside the fire. Your hands still tingle from the wind, your knees throb from standing too long, but your chest holds something new, a kind of hush, a small flame that isn't physical. Sometimes surviving winter isn't just about blankets and broth. Sometimes it's about a circle of people around a fire singing half-forgotten songs with mouths full of bread and noses full of snot, choosing joy anyway. And that might just be enough. Night has fallen deep and thick like a wool cloak pulled over the sky. Inside your cottage, the only light is the soft flickering glow of a stubby candle balanced carefully in an old iron holder. You squint at it as you pull the children in close, each one bundled like a tiny log under a patchwork of every usable textile in the house. There are 6 of you sharing the bed tonight. You're not even sure whose elbow is in your ribs, and honestly, it doesn't matter. Body heat is body heat, and privacy is a luxury for another lifetime. The room is quiet now, save for the occasional crackle of the hearth, the gentle wheeze of your aunt's breath, and the wind's persistent pawing at the shuttered window. You can hear it whistling through every crack in the daub, slipping across your ankles like a curious ghost. You tug the blanket tighter. It's a losing battle. Historians still argue whether peasants used curtains or simple wooden partitions to separate sleeping areas. In your case, it's a sheet hung from a rope across the corner, flimsy, stained, and mostly symbolic. The only real barrier between bedroom and living room is who snores louder. There's a candle on the hearth ledge, almost burned to its base. You consider blowing it out to save wax, but then you remember the dark, true, full darkness. You've known it. You don't love it. So the candle stays. Your youngest is curled against your side, fingers wrapped in your shirt like an anchor. She talks in her sleep sometimes, mumbling nonsense about cows and honey, and once about dancing with a duck. You stroke her hair gently, careful not to wake her. Dreams are fragile and good ones are rare. Overhead, a few wooden beams groan with the cold. You glance up. Nothing leaks for now. The thatch was patched 2 months ago, which makes it practically brand new by your standards. The only furniture in the room is functional. A stool, a chest, a wooden cradle that doubles as storage for extra rushes. You once saw a picture of a noble's nursery filled with lace and carved furniture. You couldn't even imagine it. Not because it was luxurious, because it had space. One quirky peasant trick: some folks placed warm stones in their children's beds before tucking them in. You did it once. The child rolled over onto it and screamed for 10 minutes. Now the stone sits by the fire, used as a footrest and occasional doorstop. Your spouse is already half asleep, breathing heavy, one arm draped across 2 of the kids. He snores a little, but you've gotten used to it. It's practically a lullaby now. Your mother, curled near the hearth, mumbles a prayer under her breath. You don't catch the words, but the tone is steady calming, like she's knitting something with sound. Your eyes drift to the candle again. The wax pool is deep now, trembling with every draught. You think about how many more candles you have. 2, maybe 3. After that, it's tallow and prayer. You once tried making candles from leftover cooking fat. The result smelled like burned stew and betrayal. But hey, it lit the room. In the background, a familiar sound begins, one of the boys grinding his teeth. It's quiet now, but you know it'll get louder. You make a mental note to stick a rag between his molars tomorrow night. It worked once. Kind of. You shift slightly, adjusting your legs so they're not pressing against the cold wall. The warmth from the fire has faded and the blanket feels thin. You sigh long and low, trying not to wake anyone. And then you see it. A little flicker. A tiny dancing shadow on the wall. It's from the candle, but the way it moves reminds you of that Lucy's Day bonfire. The children laughing, the music, the slightly charred bread. It makes you smile. Even in this dark, drafty, overcrowded room, there's some spark that makes the cold feel a little less cruel. You don't have a feather bed. You don't have pillows or curtains or books to read aloud. But you have this, a pile of warm, snoring bodies, a faint light and a roof mostly overhead. You shift again, laying your arm over the little one. She stirs, then sighs. You catch the faintest smell of whatever she was eating earlier, possibly onion, definitely turnip. Outside, the wind picks up. The shutters rattle softly like they're trying to speak. You close your eyes and listen to the rhythm, wind snore, wheeze, fire crack creak. This is your lullaby. Not gentle, not sweet, but real. You don't fall asleep all at once. It comes in waves. First your feet stop shivering, then your shoulders go heavy, then your breath slows, matching the candle's flicker. And just before you drift off completely, you think one last thought. At least the goat isn't in the bed tonight. Small mercies. The rooster crows far too early again. You groan half buried in your scratchy blanket cocoon and consider ignoring it. But the rooster does not care. He crows for attention. He crows for dominance. He crows because that's just what he does. You peel yourself out of the bedding limbs, stiff and hair pointing in 7 directions. The air is sharp, slicing across your skin the second you're exposed. You shuffle to the fire, kneel, and begin your morning coaxing of the embers. They're not dead, but they're sulking. You know the feeling. By the time the rest of the family stirs, you're already wrapping rags around your feet and stuffing a rough hat over your ears. It's not a hat, strictly speaking. It's a modified flour sack with a hole cut in the top. Stylish, warmish, mostly clean. What more could you ask for? You're headed to the woods today. Firewood's running low, and what little is left near the village has either been taken claimed or frozen into the ground like it's trying to hibernate. You grab a crude axe and sling a woven basket over your back. The leather straps cut into your shoulders before you've even reached the fence line, and the mud tries to steal your boots with every step. Classic. Historians still argue whether peasants had access to decent winter clothing or mostly relied on layering whatever scraps they could find. In your case, it's definitely the latter. Under your cloak is a tunic. Under that, a thinner tunic. Then a sash. Then a rag that might have once been a sleeve. You're basically a walking onion. One quirky item you spot on a neighbor this morning, a hat made entirely of felted sheep wool shaped like a pointed cone. It looks ridiculous. It also looks warm. You make a mental note to trade for one if your next loaf of bread doesn't turn out like a brick. You pass others along the way, some heading toward the well, some trudging to the frozen stream to fish through holes cut in the ice. Everyone's bundled in their own personal collection of woolhide and hopeful layering. You nod, they nod back. It's a language of mutual suffering. At the tree line, the snow is deeper, untouched. Pure in the way only snow can be when no one's had the energy to ruin it yet. You trudge through breath-steaming fingers, already stiff despite the ragged mittens. You spot a fallen branch and move toward it with the grace of a wounded elk. The axe bites in sluggishly, the wood's frozen solid. Every strike sends a jolt up your arms and a fresh wave of regret into your soul. Still, you keep going, because in winter, comfortable is a fairy tale. The goal is less horrible than yesterday. You gather what you can, dead limbs, pine cones, anything dry enough to burn. You tie it all with cord and hoist the bundle onto your back. Your knees protest. Your spine mutters something unprintable. You trudge on. On the way back, the wind picks up again. Little flurries sweep across the path, stinging your eyes. You duck your head and press forward, your thoughts occupied with the single-minded focus of the weary get home, get warm, eat something vaguely edible. You reach your door, kick the snow off your boots and collapse inside with your prize. The fire welcomes the wood like a lost friend crackling to life the moment you feed it. Warmth seeps slowly back into the room, into your fingers, your shoulders, your soul. The children are busy with their daily tasks, spinning wool, stirring soup, poking the goat to see if it's awake. You offer them each a pat on the head. The goat headbutts you gently. It's how he shows love. You hang your outer cloak near the fire to dry. Steam curls upward from it, mingling with the scent of yesterday's stew. You don't know whether to gag or smile. You settle on both. Later in the day, you set about mending things. A glove that's split at the seam, a tunic with one sleeve longer than the other. The basket you carried this morning has lost a few fibers. You reinforce it with bits of twine saved from a sack of beans. This too is survival. You aren't making fashion. You're making barriers. Barriers against cold, against damp, against a world that insists on leaking in from every corner. And when you've done what you can, you sit back and admire your work. It's not perfect, it's not pretty, but it's yours, and it works. For now, at least. Outside, the wind howls again. Inside, you tug your odd little hat tighter over your ears, pour yourself a cup of warm ale, and sit beside the hearth. Wrapped in wool, surrounded by wood, wearing clothes that smell of smoked goat and possibly onions, but warm. Tonight, as you settle onto your straw-stuffed bed for the 1000th time this winter, your body heavy and your legs humming with fatigue, your thoughts drift not to chores or firewood, or how many toes you can still feel, but to bread. Warm bread, not the rock-hard, week-old heel you gnawed on earlier, but the idea of bread. Fresh, soft, possibly even fluffy. It smells of warmth, of life, of everything winter is not. You can practically taste it in your sleep-starved mind. And while you lie there, one arm under your head and one foot still too cold to be taken seriously, something strange happens. Your brain starts dreaming of spring. Not vivid dreams, not yet. Just little flickers, green buds, a patch of thawed soil, a chicken laying without freezing her eggs solid. It's hazy like memory and hope mixed in equal parts. The air in the cottage hasn't warmed much despite your best efforts. The fire's low, the wind still seeps through the door walls, and your sister stole the slightly less stinky blanket. But even with all that, tonight doesn't feel as cruel. Just tired. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants marked the turning of the seasons with calendars or simply by feel, how the air changed, how the ground softened, how the animals acted. You know it's coming. Not from a date, but from something quieter, the way your joints hurt a bit less. The way the mud near the door is wetter, not frozen. The way a robin dared to chirp outside yesterday morning. It's not much, but it's something. You shift in bed, trying to avoid the pokiest straw bits, and press your hands beneath your arms for warmth. Above you, the rafters drip faintly snow, melting, trickling down into the corners like nature's version of a leaky faucet. Annoying, but hopeful. Hope in winter is dangerous. It's a luxury you can't always afford. But tonight it creeps in anyway, stubborn and soft. You think about planting again when the ground loosens up, about real vegetables, about walking barefoot in the dirt. You imagine peeling off layer after layer of wool and rag, feeling sunlight that doesn't stab your skin with cold needles. You let your thoughts wander to a spring day from years ago, the smell of new grass, the sound of laughter, someone passing around a fresh loaf with butter for heaven's sake. You probably romanticize it now, but who cares? Memories are allowed to lie a little. The baby stirs beside you. You pat her gently and she settles back down with a tiny snuffle. Even her dreams seem warmer tonight. You glance at the window at what passes for one, just a square hole with a piece of oiled cloth stretched across it. The wind doesn't scream quite as much. The corners don't curl in frost. That has to mean something, right? The goat shifts in its sleep somewhere near the door. You really hope it doesn't try to climb on the table again. Not after last time. That candlestick still leans to one side. You chuckle quietly. The sound surprises you. One quirky belief in your village is that the first dream of spring is sacred. A sign that you'll make it through the rest of winter. That your body knows before your brain does. You're not sure if it's true, but you want it to be. And as the fire dwindles to a faint glow and the candle burns low in its stubby holder, your thoughts keep drifting. To buds on trees, to warm hands, to bread that doesn't crack your tooth. You think of walking without slipping, of birdsong, of putting your face up to the sky and feeling heat instead of bite. But for now your bed is still straw. Your breath still clouds the air, and your dreams are still just dreams. Still, as your eyes finally close, you smile. Because spring is coming. And so is bread. You wake to birdsong. Real, honest-to-goodness birdsong. Not the croaking of crows or the squawks of annoyed chickens, but something sweeter, lighter. It's faint, barely a whisper outside your shutter, but unmistakable. You sit up slowly, your back stiff, your neck sore from sleeping on your arm again. But something's different this morning. The air doesn't sting your nose. The frost hasn't claimed the walls. A miracle of miracles, the chamber pot isn't frozen. You blink, surprised, suspicious. You press a hand to the wall. It's still cold, sure, but not death cold. You can touch it without your skin feeling like it's been cursed. You exhale and watch the breath mist hang for a second before it vanishes. Not immediately, but it vanishes. That's new. You slide out from under the blanket and stand barefoot, testing the floor. Your feet scream, but they don't go numb instantly. You shuffle to the shutter, peel it open, and peer out. And there it is. Mud. Not snow, not ice, just honest, gooey, boot-stealing mud. Brown and wet and miserable and utterly glorious. The village is waking with a kind of cautious energy, like everyone's afraid to believe it's real. A few neighbors are already outside poking at the ground with sticks like archaeologists of their own yards. One man is grinning like he just got a second cow. Another is crying because his firewood stash is finally dry enough to burn properly. You step outside, arms crossed tightly to trap the warmth of the cottage. The air smells different, like wet earth, tree sap, and something close to potential. It's not warm exactly, but it's not trying to murder you anymore. You spot your cousin slipping in the yard, covered in mud up to his knees and laughing. Not the bitter, ironic kind of laughter you've all practiced since November, but actual joy. You can't help but smile. You squint at the roof. A patch of thatch is leaking steadily. You sigh. Another job. But hey, at least your fingers won't freeze off while fixing it. Historians still argue whether the concept of surviving winter was something medieval people even thought about, or if it was just life endured, expected, repeated. But today feels like a finish line. You head to the shed and check the tools. Half of them are rusty. One is mysteriously missing a handle. You set about cleaning them anyway. There's planting to think about now, chickens to let out, soil to test with your toes. Even the goat seems brighter, or at least less grumpy. The kids are already in the yard, shrieking and stomping through puddles, throwing handfuls of slush at each other. One loses a shoe in the mud and starts hopping. You laugh and promise to help find it later. For now you stand in the sun. Yes, the sun. It's weak like a candle at the end of a long tunnel, but it's there. You tilt your face to it, eyes closed. For a moment you just breathe. Not through your scarf, not through frost-bitten lips. Just breathe. Inside someone's boiling water, not out of desperation, but just to clean, to make something better. Your mother is humming. The melody's soft forgotten, but it carries through the open window like a blessing. You head back inside and sit near the hearth. The fire is cheerful today. The kindling caught easily. No frantic coaxing, no pleading with saints, just flames. The bread today is still hard, but you toast it over the fire, and for the first time in months, it tastes like possibility. You glance around the room. The straw mattress still needs fluffing. The walls still need patching. Your hands are still cracked and stained. But you made it. You survived. Not easily, not gracefully, but completely. You look down at your feet, muddy, cold and calloused, and smile. They're still yours. All 10 toes made it against the odds. That alone feels worth celebrating. You hear someone outside shout about a blooming crocus. A flower already, could be. Could just be hope talking. But hope's allowed now. It's spring. And you. You didn't just survive winter. You outlasted it. Your hands are in the dirt. Not frozen soil, not snow, just rich, dark, real dirt. It crumbles under your fingers. It smells like worms, old leaves, and life. You lean back on your heels, wiping a smudge of mud across your cheek without realizing it. The sun is warm on your back, warm, not just less deadly. You've peeled off your outer cloak and tied your tunic sleeves back, revealing arms that haven't seen the light since Michaelmas. The earth is soft now. Ready. You dig deeper, planting your first row of spring onions, carefully, lovingly, like you're tucking in old friends. Your neighbors are out too, some tilling, some fixing fences, some just walking around, looking confused that no one's miserable. The chickens are laying again. The goat has stopped trying to eat your boots. The children are running barefoot through puddles and only complaining a little about the cold. Inside the cottage, the hearth is still burning, but it's not the center of your world anymore. You're not huddling around it like it's your last hope. Now it's just comfort. A pleasant thing, not a survival tool. You've been counting your fingers and toes every morning since December. Today, you stop. They're all still there, yes, but now that's not the only victory. The mud didn't take your boots. The coughs didn't steal your aunt. The fire didn't go out not once. You made it through the coldest nights and the hungriest days. Your back still aches. Your nails are still dirty. Your clothes are still patched like a quilt of desperation. But you feel full, somehow. You dig another row. The baby now toddling trips over a root and bursts into giggles. You scoop her up, spin her once, and set her back down. Her hair catches the sunlight like straw. You catch yourself smiling so wide it hurts. You walk to the barrel by the door and dip out liquid water, not a solid lump. You splash your face and gasp. Cold, yes, but clean. Invigorating. You glance at the scrubby patch near the wall and think, maybe, well, try planting cabbages there this year. The rooster's still screaming at nothing. Some things never change. And your family, they're already planning the midsummer feast. Your mother's been saving a cloth to trade for flour. Your brother swears he saw a peddler's wagon near the road yesterday. You're dreaming of honey, of herbs, of the first apples of autumn. But not yet. First comes planting, then waiting. Then, if you're lucky, more waiting. You've learned patience the hard way. And tonight, when the sun goes down, slow and golden, and the air smells of damp grass instead of wood smoke and despair, you'll gather around the hearth, not to beg it for warmth, but just because it's what you do. You'll talk, You'll laugh even, you'll eat a meal that doesn't come with a side of worry, and you'll sleep, not wrapped in fear or goat breath, but in peace, because the worst has passed. And spring. So now you're lying there in the dim light of your own room, safe, warm, wrapped in your favorite blanket. Maybe you're listening to the gentle hum of a fan or the faint whoosh of traffic far away. Maybe it's just quiet now. You've journeyed through a world where comfort was a luxury, where even the simplest thing, warm feet, felt like a gift from the gods, where people fought the cold not with gadgets or smart thermostats, but with body heat stubbornness and a slightly suspicious goat. And yet they made it. You made it. Through frozen shoes, through hay-stuffed bedding, through soup that was more water than hope. You lived through the dark and the damp and the endless repetition of days when the best you could say was, "We're still here." But now, the sun is rising. Not just in your mind, but maybe outside your window too. The birds are singing, the frost is melting, and you weary traveller of muddy fields and icy hearths, you can rest. The hardest season is behind you. Your body is safe, your breath is steady, and your mind can finally let go. So close your eyes, sink into that pillow. Forget the goats, forget the drafty roof, forget the chamber pot entirely. Let the rhythm of your breath take over, slow and quiet, in and out. You're not in a thatched cottage anymore. You're here, safe and warm. Good night. It's you, the same blanket, the same room, the warmth of the dying fire. But when you fall asleep, you open your eyes again and everything is different. You're no longer curled up on straw but wrapped in soft silk. Your bed has carved wooden posts, curtains as thin as mist, and pillows smell faintly of lavender. A carved door opens and a servant bows. "Sir, it's just dawn. Breakfast will be served in the great hall." You sit up. A bronze mirror reflects your image, your gold-embroidered nightgown. Your hands soft and clean, not a single callus. A ruby ring glitters on your little finger. You are a noble. Your castle is high on a hill, surrounded by pine trees, lakes, and cobblestone paths leading to the village. Servants greet you as you pass, heads bowed. No one dares to look directly, no one asks questions. Power comes with distance. Breakfast. Not watery porridge or mouldy bread. Before you are fragrant stews, fresh-baked cakes, wild honey, pickled fruits, and red wine in silver goblets. You take a bite, sweet, rich filling. No more dreams. This is real. And then duty. The steward brings the register, rents, tithes, peasants' requests for clemency. You must judge disputes, oversee crops, approve castle renovation plans. You represent the king in this land. And today there is an invitation, another noble family's wedding, and you are the guest of honor. You don silvered silk armor and strap on a ceremonial sword. In the mirror you shine, but your eyes are still you, the same person who once huddled in a thatched hut counting every log, every scrap of bread. And you wonder, is life really better? Maybe you are warmer, cleaner, but are you still free? Does anyone love you or just fear you? As you walk through the hall, your footsteps echo without a response. That evening you stand on the highest balcony looking out at the village that is sinking into darkness. A small wisp of smoke rises from the thatched roof. Someone is lighting a fire. Someone is holding a child to sleep, listening to the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. You realize you miss, not the cold, but the real thing. The warmth of laughter, of hands held in the dark, of a poor meal shared. You close your eyes, and when you open them, there you are again, in the old room on soft straw next to the fireplace. There is a steady breathing beside you. Someone has pulled the covers over you while you dream. You smile. And this time, sleep came more gently than ever. You wake up in the sand. The heat hits your face. The sun beats down from a high blue sky painted by the hand of a god. The sand is white against your cheek, fine, dry and warm as ashes. Something echoes, metal on metal, shouting, You're not wearing wool or straw, you're wearing leather armor, a heavy bronze belt around your shoulders. A cloth is tied around your forehead, damp with sweat. And in your hand, a gladius, a short blade, blunt at the tip, chipped at the edge. You don't remember why you're here, but you do. This is the arena. The shouting is loud. It's no longer the wind, it's people. Thousands of them. A huge arc around you. The Colosseum. The stone walls are high, the stands are packed from nobles to merchants, from old Roman women to teenage gamblers. All eyes are on you, and the other person. He steps out of the opposite gate, a burly man, his face covered in a steel mask, an axe in his hand. You see his eyes through the crack. No hatred, just duty. Like you. You take a breath, your chest heaves. The air here is dry, smelling of sand, old blood and sword oil. You take a step forward. Sand crunches beneath your feet. Historians still argue whether most gladiators truly fought to the death or whether the fights were more like theatrical, brutal dances. But right now you don't care about arguing. You care about surviving. The trumpet sounds a signal. The arena holds its breath. He lunges forward. You dodge instinctively, rolling to the side. Sand covers your face. You stand sword ready. He turns, axe swinging wide. But you're already moving faster, smarter. You slash him lightly in the side, just a scratch, but enough to make him roar. You don't feel like you're fighting. You feel like you're dancing a dance of time, of instinct. Every movement is reflexive. Every breath is precious. He falls, or so you think. A scream, but then he gets up roaring. No, it's not over. You look up at the stands. A man sits in the middle of the crowd in a white toga, a laurel wreath on his head. Maybe a consul. Maybe an emperor, you're not sure, but his eyes are like cold fire burning you from afar. You remember what you heard before this dream? Gladiators were slaves, prisoners, or volunteers chasing fame. You don't remember which group you belong to, but you do know as you raise your head and look up at the thousands of eyes watching you. You understand one thing: you are most alive when you face death. And then, as in all dreams, the fight ends. Not with a fatal blow, not with a bloodbath, but with silence. The other man kneels, drops the axe, looks up at you, and waits. You step forward, sword to his throat. The entire arena is focused on you, and you don't kill. You lift your head, look to the highest point, wait for a sign, fingers up or down. Historians still argue what the thumb gestures truly meant. But in this dream, you see the hand extended. Spare. You exhale. The arena erupts in cheers. You are lifted. A laurel wreath is placed on your shoulders. A gladiator who survived. A champion and a story for dinner. But in your heart there is no glory. There is only the question, who was I before this dream began? And what will I be when I wake? You sit quietly on the steps. The sword is beside you. Sand is still in your hands. The wind blows through the dome. The Roman sky is wide open. You close your eyes, and when you open it, you are lying on the old straw bed again. Small room, next to the fireplace. There is only a grain of sand on the palm of your hand. You smile, you open your eyes. Cold, still, silent as if no one had ever been there. You're lying on a stone floor, not straw, not a bed. Just smooth stone, cold as the desert night. In your hand a torch burns its light, dancing silently across the painted walls. Falcon's eyes, the Nile, and lion-headed, jackal-headed gods. You're in a pyramid. Not as a tourist, not as a mummy, but as a stone carver, the last person allowed to enter the depths of the pharaoh's tomb. Behind you is a long, narrow corridor, the dome barely high enough to stand on. In front of you is an unfinished stone door, the symbols incomplete, and that's your job. Carve the final incantation to send the pharaoh's soul to the afterlife. You take a breath. The smell of limestone torch smoke and something else. Old. Like ancient books. Like dust. At your belt is a bag of tools, chisel, hammer, brush, a cloth stained with myrrh. You begin to carve. Your hands move by memory as if you've done this 1,000 times. Every curve, every straight line. The sun symbol, Horus, the wings of Ma'at. You chant the mantra like a lullaby. He who goes on the path of Ra, with a heart no heavier than the feather of Ma'at. May the gods open the western gate so that his soul may tread lightly into the duat. You don't know why you remember, but you know if you carve wrong, the pharaoh's soul will be trapped forever. A wind blows through the corridor. Wind underground. You stop. Listen. Something distant, whispering, not a human voice, not an animal's, like stone talking. Historians still argue whether Egyptian workers truly believed in the curse of the tomb, or whether it was just a later legend. But you're right now, believe. Right. The torchlight flickers. You enter a larger room. The ceiling is high. The stone pillars are as big as ancient trees. In the center is a single stone sarcophagus carved with gold patterns. On the lid, a pharaoh, his hands crossed, holding a scepter and a whip, his eyes half closed as if smiling or watching. You put the torch on the stand and move closer to the back wall, still missing 3 symbols. You touch the stone. Cold! Cold to the bone. You begin to carve again. 1, 2. On the third stroke, the chisel rings like a bell. A section of the wall shakes slightly, and sand begins to pour in from the crack above. You step back. Sand falls like rain. Each drop touches your shoulder, your cheek burning like fire. You turn, the door behind you is still open, but the wind is blowing against it. The opposite direction. The scent of myrrh has turned to something sharper, almost blood. You try to stay calm. You repeat a prayer in your mind. Isis holds, the way Anubis shows the way. We are servants of the light. Do not awaken what is buried. You place your hand on the lid of the coffin. The stone is cold, but beneath your palm, there is a pulse. For a moment you want to run, but your feet don't move. Instead, you light a second torch. The light spreads, bounces off the walls, and now you see the entire room is engraved with your name. Not stone carver, but the chosen one. You are not just the one who completes the tomb. You are the final gift. And then the light comes on, but not from the torch. From inside the coffin, you close your eyes. Not out of fear, out of peace. You feel a voice in your head, deep ancient like sand sliding over stone for 1,000 years. You have done the last thing. The dream is closed. Return, keeper of memories.